Hello again, everybody. It is another time for a fantastic episode of Anarchy Among Friends Roundtable Discussion. If you haven't figured out yet, am not Jason. And that's because we're doing a special episode because of what happened today. It is Thursday, September 9th. And today, Joe Biden decided that he was going to just segregate the country by fiat. So we decided, me and Kris, that we were going to do a special episode for that. And that is why, if you're watching this, I am in a suit. Well, not quite a suit. I'm in a blazer and a nice shirt because I'm going to play a little bit of lawyer today. Now, I do want to head this off by pointing out, first of all, that we are covered by the BibCot No Government License for the use and reuse of the podcast by anyone and everyone except for governments and their agents. And of course, I am not a lawyer. I've never been a lawyer.
I would also like to state for the record that I am not a lawyer.
Yeah, Kris is also not a lawyer. And I am not licensed. Neither one of us is licensed to practice law anywhere, nor are we ever likely to be, except maybe some Central American country with really liberal views on the word qualified. So therefore, this is hashtag not legal advice. Should not be taken as legal advice. It should be taken as entertainment and information and the opinions and ramblings of people who are totally unqualified. I don't even know if I know any lawyers personally. So take that.
I know a retired judge and one lawyer, neither of which knows anything about the types of things we're going to discuss tonight. So
cool. So I may get some things wrong here. I may not, but from my understanding and the little bit of stuff that I know about the law, this is kind of a quick breakdown on something that bugged me that I in particular saw. And, you know, as we all know, government screws you really hard, like constantly, right? Everybody knows that. But with
it's
Biden's...
the one thing they do efficiently.
Yeah, the one thing that they do efficiently is they screw you, and they screw you hard, and they screw you in so many different directions. And this COVID mandate is definitely screwing everybody really hard, because not only does it mean that, you know, they said 70% of all surveyed workers said that they would rather quit a job than stay there if they mandated a vaccine. And that sounds great until you realize that that's about to change, because that was when they could have turned to other employers who wouldn't have mandated a vaccine. And now with this vaccine mandate coming down the pipeline, no matter where you go, it's going to be required. So you're not going to have that choice anymore. And I think a lot of more people are going to bend the knee than would have otherwise. And they're going to do it justifying it to themselves that, well, I need to pay my bills. I need to feed my family. I need to, so, well, it's just easier to keep my head down and to just comply and just keep doing this. But the chances are, with this, you're really, really screwed. No matter how you want to look at it, you're really screwed here at this point. And the law probably isn't going to help you at all, even a little bit.
The only spot, and we'll get more into this later, the only spot where I saw any chance of there being any type of relief was in industries that don't receive direct federal contributions. The only chance in hell that they would have a leg to stand on.
Well, even that, probably not. And we'll get into why not here momentarily. I mean, the reasons why this should be as terrifying as it is to everyone should terrify everyone. Even if you think an untested vaccine that rewrites the genetics of your immune system and that doesn't end initial clinical trials for like 2 more years, and has strong enough possible reproductive side effects that the Israelis are dumping now millions of dollars into researching that after they rolled it out to 90% of their population. Even if you think that's perfectly safe, the total lack of accountability here is absolutely horrifying. And why, you might ask? Well, if you get it because of the mandate, and it causes harm, even if that's serious, irreversible, life-altering harm, there's probably nothing you can do about it at all.
No. Well, even before the mandates, they had already absolved the pharmaceutical companies of any legal liability. Obviously they absolved themselves of any legal liability. Your employer, if they required you to get it, they absolved them of any legal liability. So
Yep. Well, and that's what we're going to get into, is exactly what they actually did and what's going on here. Because when I started to think about it, when I started to think about the legal ramifications of this and where this actually all came from and what kind of recourse you'd have if you did take it, I realized there is no within the system way out. It's but Andrew, I can hear the poor deluded fools that still believe they can change the system from the inside whining right now. We can just sue them if we get hurt. That's what you do when an employer makes you do something and you get hurt, right? You just sue them. Except you probably can't at all. Anyone whatsoever. The reason for that is the same reason Biden might get away with what is a pretty obvious violation of,
basic
if
human
we're
rights.
honest, virtually every single item in the Bill of Rights. Like, it violates the 10th Amendment, it violates the First Amendment, it violates, that there are very few amendments that are not being violated by this, and those Biden's also trying to attack too. So, how's your paper shield working out for you?
I was going to say, the only one quartering, obviously is not being violated, and the Second Amendment in this particular case isn't being violated. But pretty much everything else.
Yeah, it kind of blows my mind. But the reason why he's probably going to get away with this is because his office isn't actually the one issuing the mandate. Well, yes, he's the one who talked about it and things. If he just said, and no more employment of people who are unvaccinated, that is just so illegal. In just so many ways. Like, that would be illegal to everybody. Like, it would be so obvious that he can't do that I don't think anyone would ever actually legitimately try to say that he could, even with his hard left, as obviously his administration is.
I'm sorry. I've seen so many people out there especially in the cesspool that is the Twitterverse, that have said nothing less than, if you're unvaccinated, there should be a $10,000 bounty on your head.
Oh, there's one. The Twitterverse is like the definition of toxic. Like, if you look up toxic online culture, it's just a picture of Twitter.
It's the icon.
It's so bad. But yeah, they're completely unhinged. And so, I can see some of the more extreme ones that are like, kill all unvaccinated people, and so, because it's about my health, that's why they want to kill me. Yeah, okay. But what Biden's doing here, though, is something that the president, as the head of the executive branch of government, is actually allowed to do under the law. He's issuing an order to an enforcement agency, in this case to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, to create and enforce regulatory requirements, which is totally something that they're allowed to do under the law. Okay, so far, that is something he's allowed to do. He can say, do this, and they can do this because, one, they're theoretically part of the executive branch themselves, which is charged by constitutional mandate to enforce laws and regulations. And two, it doesn't matter if Congress said they could do this, because of chevron deference. And I've covered chevron deference before on Anarchist Weapons Wednesdays I used to do on Facebook Live, and I do have that episode that I cover chevron deference in significant detail, still up on YouTube. So I'm not going to go into it too much, but basically what it means is that if a law doesn't explicitly define what a thing is, and doesn't define what it is not, then it's left up to the agency in charge of enforcing that to decide. the definitions. I mean, that's something we see all the time with BATFI, where they're constantly, I mean, very, very liberally applying chevron deference in a way it was never meant to be applied. And actually, if you read the case, it was never supposed to be allowed to be applied.
Yeah. For example, anybody that listens to us regularly has heard us bitch about the bump stock ban, because that's a complete redefinition of what a machine gun actually is. For those of you who don't know, a machine gun is one pull the trigger, multiple rounds come out of the firearm. Yep. With a bump stock, it just takes your finger off the trigger so you can pull it again. It makes it easier for you to take your finger off the trigger. That's it. But it still requires a cycling of the trigger in order for a round to be expelled.
Well, it's like FRTs, right? The FRT, the forced reset triggers, or the binary triggers and stuff. Like, they keep trying to say that those are machine guns, and so we've all seen chevron deference. Most people who are in the gun world are well aware of what chevron deference means, and it means that the agency can completely run amok. It can just do whatever it wants because, oh well, chevron. So this falls under my purview, therefore I can just make things up as I go. They're trying to do it with the pistol braces, right? The comments for that just closed recently. The public comments are almost entirely negative.
The same thing with the receiver redefinition.
Yeah,
200 and some odd thousand comments on that one, and they were like 95% negative.
Yeah, I mean, no one wants them to change it. Everyone understands that what they're doing is very easily arguably illegal as it is. And again, not that your paper shield means anything, right? The Constitution is meaningless. We all know it's meaningless. But under the law, they're still not supposed to be able to do this. But OSHA can probably do what they're going to do. And why does chevron deference matter to OSHA and the mandates for the COVID testing and vaccine mandate? Well, it's because OSHA is supposedly about workplace safety. And in an era of COVID hysteria, it's all about your safety. That's the argument. It's about your safety because we have to protect you. They're basically going to treat it the same way they would, anything else that they do. So the argument that's being made is that because they're tasked with instituting rules on employers that force them to make everyone safer in the workplace, and that term in the law that allows them to do this is left intentionally vague. Exactly what constitutes safety or more safe, right? Like, that's left so up to interpretation. And you could understand and argue, well, yeah, because, I mean, who knows what new industries are going to happen, and they have to be able to move with that and whatever else. But it's left really, really vague. But if the vaccine mandate makes people more safe in OSHA's opinion, until Congress legislates otherwise, they can make employers require it the same way they can require a safety harness or a hard hat. Because that's their argument, is it's making everybody safer by doing it. Now, whether that's true or not is irrelevant. That's going to be the argument. It's about safety. I roll. Not that that's what it's ever been about.
No, it's all just like everything else that they've done. It's always been about control.
Yeah, ultimately that's what all of this stuff is, right? It's all of what you're seeing is about control, enforcing compliance, pushing the Overton window so people get more and more used to more and more restrictions, especially because now that they've seen what is happening in, like, say, France with the COVID passport, they know that definitely won't work in a country that has gained more new gun owners in the past 18 months than the entire size of the Chinese military. It's actually exponentially more. So we are effectively like the largest army in the world, just civilian gun owners in the United States. So looking at that, they're not going to try and push things all at once, because how do you boil a frog without it jumping out if you don't have a lid for the pot? You just turn up that heat nice and slow and just keep making it hotter and hotter. And by the time they realize that they're cooked, it's too damn late. They're cooked. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. It's about shifting that Overton window. I mean, it's the same thing as they did with Chipman. Like Chipman was never supposed to win the get approved for the nomination. That was never supposed to happen. He's just shifting the window to the extreme so that when the next guy comes along who's almost as bad as him, but a little bit less vocal about it, then he won't seem so bad and he'll probably get it, which is probably what we're about to see in the next few weeks. So while I mean it's really already disgusting enough that the whole safetyness thing to most of the people who listen to us, I mean, generally the fact that we tend to slap people in the face with the you're not actually governed by elected officials, you're governed by a bunch of unelected faceless bureaucrats, that seems to weed out the more statist people uh, pretty quickly, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I feel like just the way that we throw that out there so hard is probably gonna make most people kind of, if they're not really, if they don't understand that whole I don't want to be ruled thing, they tend to kind of veer off. Um, but if that isn't disgusting enough, to use a phrase that everyone dreads on this show, but wait, it gets better.
You are close enough. I can beat you.
It gets so much better because OSHA is a government enforcement agency. It is nearly always shielded from liability, except under the FTCA, which is the Federal Tort Claims Act. So tort law basically deals with real measurable harm or loss to a person or property or entity. So like if somebody is street racing and runs you down as you're crossing, you know, in a crosswalk with a walk signal and stuff, and then your family sues them for killing you for negligence, that's tort law. Okay, there's real appreciable loss that has happened that you can measure, and you can say this, you know, this person is no longer alive, or you know, or your arm gets cut off because somebody was running a saw at a sawmill without any guards on it, and you lost your arm and there was signs up not to do that and everything, you can sue them for negligence, right? Or willful misconduct. And that's basically what's happening is the FTCA basically says in normal circumstances, you can still sue a federal agency if you can prove that its actions materially harmed you or your livelihood as a result of willful and intentional misconduct. So they can't just it has to be, you have to be able to prove that it's willful and intentional, the misconduct. It can't just be they got something wrong. It has to be they intentionally did something that they knew could result in harm and they didn't care.
So perhaps something along the lines of the FDA rushing the approval on the Pfizer vaccine just to make the OSHA's ruling, you know, carry some water, because they can't, even OSHA can't force you to get an experimental.
Right.
Thing.
Only an approved one.
Only an approved one.
Well, and see, I mean, and you know, and if it sounds like it would be hard enough to prove that a government agency's conduct was willfully negligent in a court, where, you know, all of the employees there are part of the government. The whole court is part of the government. The government runs it. The government sets the rules. The government decides whether or not it's even going to accept your argument.
Yeah, wag the dog, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'd be absolutely correct if you think that that's already nigh impossible. Which brings us to PrEP. PREP. For those playing at home, PrEP is the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act. And I'm not going to get into that absolute draconian nightmare of a bill or its unabashedly draconian implications. But the relevance is that once the PrEP Act is invoked by the declaration of a public health emergency, among other things, it shields any person or entity that, quote, manufactures, distributes, administers, prescribes, or uses covered countermeasures, among other things. in combating whatever crisis has been declared from any liability, save in the case of things like what the FTCA covers, which are now even harder to prove because now it's an emergency. So you're trying to prove that they willfully did something that they knew was wrong in an environment with limited and possibly inaccurate information already. So all they have to do is go, well, we had inaccurate or incomplete information when we made that decision, and boom, now it's not willful or negligent anymore.
Yep.
So
Because you have to be
to
able to prove intent, and there's no way to prove intent when they have that easy of an out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, all they have to do is, well, we were acting in good faith with what we had at the time. So even if it comes out later that what they did was really dumb and hurt people, all they have to do is, well, we acted in good faith on behalf of, our mandate from the government with the information available at the time. And if it was inaccurate or incomplete, well, that's not on us. And at that point, the judge goes, yep, that's not willful or negligent, and then tosses your case. That's actually how qualified immunity works.
Yep. There isn't already established jurisprudence that says that specific event actually happened and left the officer liable. He's not liable.
Yep. And what do we always cover on this show, right? Like we always talk about how courts keep kicking the can down the road and go, well, there's no established jurisprudence, so I can't establish jurisprudence.
Right. That whole circular logic that we all love to.
Yeah, it's a Mobius strip of legal reasoning. What? It's just ridiculous. So, like, essentially what they're saying is that no one else has ever decided. So I can't decide for the first time because no one else has ever decided for me to rely on. Well, somebody's got to be the first to decide.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of thing that you're dealing with here. So the PrEP needs a national health emergency, and that kicked in, if you guys will remember, and you weren't living under a rock at the time, on March 17th, 2020, when Donald Trump's Secretary of Health, Alex Azar, declared COVID-19 a public health emergency.
Yep. Which is why Operation Warp Speed, which gave us these wonderful jabs, really started to take off.
Oh, and we'll get there. So PrEP protections, when he did that, right? The exact way that the law works is a little complicated, but basically what it amounts to is it was retroactive to February 4th of 2020. And it doesn't end. Get this, the PrEP protections and those extra powers for the public health emergency. Remember that word? Emergency. Don't end until the 1st of October, 2024.
4 years. 4.5 years.
Yeah, for an emergency. Because it's that much of an emergency. It's that urgent. They need powers for 4 years.
And as we all are very well aware, there is nothing more permanent than a temporary thing in government.
Yeah. Well, Hitler was only granted temporary emergency powers.
Yeah, it's just then he got to the point where he had enough power that he could say, oh, no, it's still an emergency.
Well, any Star Wars buff will remember Emperor Palpatine when he was still Senator Palpatine. I swear I will return these powers to the Senate as soon as this crisis has passed.
And according to him, it never passed.
Yep. Ain't that convenient? Well, yeah, of course it never passed. There's all these terrorists blowing up Death Stars.
Well, it's like we've said recently on the show, even the variants will continue until compliance improves.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're up to there's the Delta, the
Mu,
Gamma, the Mu. Yeah, the Mu. I saw them like a Mew variant, isn't it? Isn't that just Mewtwo? Pretty sure that's the variant of Mew.
Every time I see something about the Mew variant, I keep saying, well, somebody better call Ash.
Yeah, he can catch them all, right? So just get him his little Pokeballs. We'll get it taken care of. Unless that's what the coronavirus really is. It's a Pokeball.
Oh.
Oh, now it all makes sense. It's all Mew running around. Yeah, Mewtwo is kind of a jerk, so it would make sense.
Yeah.
But also, I want to note, think about that date, October 1st, 2024. There are still 2 years remaining in the COVID vaccines initial trials, which means that they end in 2023. And there's an additional year after they end, almost exactly, before the protections from PrEP end. I mean, it could be a coincidence.
But I doubt it.
Who knows? Just point that one out. Just point that one out.
To go along with that, I never thought that I would be scrolling through, that cesspool on Twitter or even old news articles, because I keep some old interesting news articles. I never thought that I would be scrolling through that and going, why is Alex Jones sounding like a goddamn soothsayer at this point?
Right? Man, was psychic. That's why you keep seeing the meme all over the place of him like sipping the champagne and looking all smug, because like he keeps being that right.
Right, and it's terrifying that he was that right.
I know.
With that,
just
I never thought that I would sit here and go, all right, Alex Jones, there have been times when I've criticized you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like I'm sorry, I doubted you, man. Like
Right.
I
He tried to warn everybody. Nobody wanted to listen. Everybody thought he was a fucking crackpot. Now look around you.
Yeah, well, I mean, like there was that complaint on Twitter with the I think it was on Twitter. It might have been on like Tumblr or something, but I just saw a screenshot of it where it was like this person complaining about the government keeps proving his conspiracy theorist friend right, and you need to stop enabling him. And everyone's like, doesn't sound like conspiracy theorist, just sounds like he's much more observant than you.
Right?
Remember that paranoia is simply reality on a finer scale. But so I mean, so with that, right, with PrEP and stuff, we can't sue the doctrine, the FTCPA, we can't sue government agencies for any harm to the vaccine. They forced our employers to force us to get causes. But what about the producers of the vaccines who put them out there? Yeah.
They're also protected under PrEP.
Yes, refer to PrEP Act. Oh, and by the way, not only does it shield the producers and distributors, but remember, it also shields the prescribers and users, the doctors and nurses who are giving it to you.
So at this point, the only recourse is potentially your employer.
Yeah, that at this point, based on what we've covered so far, all you got left is your employer to sue for making you get it, assuming that you then get sick, which statistically, if you've already had COVID, you're very, very likely to do.
Yep.
Because
which, if you've been following along with our show for any length of time, you'll know that Andrew and I have both had it.
Yep. I had one of the advanced cases where I lost my sense of taste and smell, and it lasted for like 6 days.
And see, I lost my sense of taste and smell, but my symptoms lasted about 36 hours. And then I got my taste and smell back the following week.
Yeah, it took me about 3 months to get my sense of taste and smell back, and I would come home from work and just sleep the first 2 days as I was developing it. And then I only really had like a 12.5 hour time frame where like I felt like my chest was really heavy and it was kind of hard to breathe. And after that went away, I was fine again. I was just like, I'm just kind of tired. It's kind of like a flu, and not even a terrible one, except for that one night. Like it was just a flu, man. Like it wasn't even all that terrible. I've been sicker.
Right. In my case, I started having some extremely mild cold symptoms on Sunday night, and Amber, or my wife, went and got her test because she was far sicker than I ever got. at that point, and her test came back positive. So then I called my employer and was like, hey, definitely been exposed because, 24 hours ago, my wife and I had sex while she had COVID.
No, you definitely been exposed.
And so they're like, okay, well, we'll schedule you up for a nasal swab on Tuesday. Okay, woke up Tuesday morning, felt kind of crappy, a little bit of body aches, no coughing, no respiratory symptoms, just some nasal drainage and some body aches and a mild fever. I went in, they picked my brain. By the time I got home, I'd already gotten my positive result.
So you're really positive.
And yeah, I was off for the rest of that week, and by the time Monday rolled around, I was asymptomatic and absolutely fine.
Yeah, and it's and that's the typical story, right? Like almost everybody's like that, except for people who are like immunocompromised or they have some serious lung condition already. They have at least a few comorbidities. Those are the ones who have the problems, not young, healthy, or even older healthy individuals or very young healthy individuals. If you're already healthy, you're probably just going to get over it. I mean, it's not something that's going to kill the vast majority of people or really make them that sick. And yet they want to mandate that you get stabbed in the brain weekly to keep your job.
Yep.
Or go get an experimental injection for this really nasty flu.
I was talking to somebody the other day about the experimental injection, especially the approved one from Pfizer, which is an mRNA shot. Fun fact, if you don't already know that.
Yeah, it literally manipulates the protein chains inside your I forget the technical name for white blood cells, but inside your white blood cells so that it reprograms your immune system.
The T cell.
Okay, the T cells.
That's what you were
looking for. Yeah.
It reprograms the T cell, but it supposedly doesn't impact the nucleus. It just impacts like the mitochondrial DNA, which is kind of important.
Yeah, well, that's why they initially, right? They said that pregnant women shouldn't get it because there's not a hard enough casing yet or resilient enough casing on the nucleus of a cell of an unborn baby. So they're at risk of it manipulating more than it's supposed to. And then they started pushing it on pregnant women, and now all these pregnant women are spontaneously terminating their pregnancies, and then having difficulty conceiving after that, which is what Israel is now investigating very actively.
Right. Another fun thing that Israel has investigated is the instance of breakthrough cases for your full, quote unquote, fully vaccinated individuals versus recurrent infection in people who previously had COVID.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of recurrent infections, I don't imagine, in people who already had it.
You are 7 times more likely to have a breakthrough infection if you had COVID, if you had the alpha variant, the original variant of COVID, prior to January 1, 2021. If you had COVID at any point from January 2021 until May of 2021, you are 13 times more likely as a vaccinated individual to have a breakthrough than to have a recurrent infection from any of the additionally identified variants, including Delta, Mu, and Gamma.
Are you suggesting that human immune systems function?
No, I would never suggest such a controversial fucking fact of biology.
It's just, but okay, so
now that we've gone off on that little tangent.
Yeah, so employers are the only ones left, right? That you would be able to sue. I mean, they've got to be held liable since that was condition of employment, right? You'd like to think that, wouldn't you?
But this is the rare instance where they actually care about business owners' rights.
Yeah, there's just all kinds of hold harmless measures in place in this instance for employers. They're probably the most protected, actually. I mean, it's like a suit of adamantium. I mean, this legal armor is impenetrable from any direction.
A suit of
Uh,
adamantium with maybe an extra layer of vibranium on top of it.
yeah, like this is the amount of legal protections for your employer in this instant are kind of insane, and a lot of them know it. One of the things when I was doing research for this episode that I realized was that there are hundreds, literally hundreds of opinions from attorney groups that specialize in business law and tort law and things that go into here's how an employer can easily protect themselves with any anti-COVID measures. Like there's tons of articles, tons and tons. In contrast, now that's on Google. I should specify that is on Google. If you pull up DuckDuckGo and look for the same kinds of things, all of a sudden you're finding a pretty solid mixture of stuff about, what kind of liability does my employer have versus how can I avoid liability as the employer. And I find that interesting. Again, I'm not being conspiratorial. I just mention that because I find that interesting. You can make your conclusion there. Just going to point out. But when we're talking about employers first, there is yet again that fancy dancy little PrEP Act, you pesky little rascal, and it's shielding because they're doing things in response to a declared health crisis. And therefore, because they are taking those measures against that health crisis that are being prescribed by federal agencies, shielded. No liability for them. So that's a dead end. And then you think, okay, well, but I mean, like, what happens when that ends? Maybe I can find a way that I can still sue them. And then there's the DPA.
Yes. I was talking about this with somebody at work today.
Yeah. So what Kris referred to earlier is the Operation Typhoon or something like that, or Operation Warp Speed. There we go. Operation Warp Speed. That's the DPA in action. The Defense Production Authorization Act. Which again was invoked by Donald Trump the day after his head of HHS declared it a public health crisis. So the 17th of March, public health crisis declared by Donald Trump's head of Health and Human Services. March 18th, 2020, Donald Trump invokes the DPA. So normally the DPA, if you're unfamiliar with what it is it's used for things like forcing Ford to build B-17s and Louisville Slugger to make M1 carbines in World War II. Right? Like that's what it's normally used for historically, is things like that.
But
Still
if you recall,
blatantly.
yeah. But if you recall, Donald Trump used it last year to force different companies to make ventilators and all kinds of other stuff.
GM, he had GM, I think, making face shields.
Yes.
And stuff. Yeah, Recall Motors making personal protective equipment. That sounds like a fantastic idea. How could that ever go wrong?
The bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays out more.
Yes. Ventilators from a company who can't figure out how to make a vehicle that doesn't need 12 or doesn't have 12 recalls in its first model year. Yep.
Or my personal favorite, if I remember correctly, Ford Motor Company was taking the variable speed blower motors that they had left over from their previous model year truck and turning them into ventilators.
I mean, strictly speaking, the science on that pans out, but it does seem like maybe not the same quality as what you would want in something that is literally going to be keeping someone alive.
You know, you and those pesky facts. I
mean, I'm not saying that any vehicle manufacturer in the United States would ever, engage in intentional obsolescence or anything, but I'm just saying they might know people who might. But I mean, the DPA is still a blatantly fascist move, right? Like it's the government literally ordering companies to do a thing because the government says so, that is literally, I cannot emphasize enough how literally a fascist thing that is. That is, in
Well,
fact,
more
what
than just
Hitler and Mussolini did.
well, not just Hitler and Mussolini, but I mean that's goes beyond fascism and into communism as well. I mean, the Central Planning Committee for the Communist Party in the Soviet Union did the exact same thing.
Well, and part of that's because they're both just branches of the same tree.
Yeah, they are.
But they're, I mean, they all kind of stem from Marx and stuff. It's just that the fascists and the National Socialists didn't like the Bolshevik idea that, you know, everyone falls into worker classes or bourgeois classes, and they didn't really like that idea. They thought of classes as race and nationality, but that's another topic that again I covered on a different podcast. If you want to go listen to that, that's
That
the
was a really
status
good.
quo.
That was a really good one.
Yep. Yeah, it was the status quo, episode 98, Weimar America. That's definitely a good one. And really,
Oddly important for the current situation.
oh yeah, it just keeps getting more relevant. Um, but yeah, so that's, I mean, that's pretty, pretty fascist, but that's, that's a different topic. In this case, though, it's applicable. The DPA is applicable because it shields companies from liability for making their workers do something that the employer was ordered to have them do by the federal government that could result in personal loss or injury. That's specifically listed in the DPA.
Such as irrevocable reproductive harm, adverse, say Guillain-Barré syndrome, or
Well, yeah,
any kind of autoimmune response to an experimental vaccine, or
well, yeah, I mean, like originally written, if you cut your arm off trying to build a B-17 because you don't, you're not super experienced with how to work a sheet metal machine, and it cuts your arm off. Well, tough shit, nerd. Like,
yeah,
DPA shields you from liability. Get Guillain-Barré seizures, lose your baby spontaneously because of an experimental vaccine. Well, you're going to have to kick rocks because the DPA is going to completely shield your employer because they were ordered by government to do this thing on behalf of the nation because of an emergency situation. Now, is that the way the DPA should have, was intended to be applied? No, but remember that the bludgeon you use against your enemy today turns into the same bludgeon that they use against you tomorrow. And the bludgeon that you hand your friend that he uses to help you today could also be the bludgeon that he uses to help somebody else or himself tomorrow fairly easily. So, that's...
and the fines that Creepy Uncle Joe or President Scarecrow, I heard that one put out there earlier. The fines that they're proposing are $14,000 per violation, and that's a daily accruing penalty.
Yep, and that's per violation means per employee that they're not making either get the vax or get weekly tested. Per employee, $14,000 a day that they're being fined for keeping you on their payroll.
Yep.
That's what they're potentially facing. Now, again, this didn't just drop all at once and it's immediately in place. That ain't how government works. The wheels turn real slow, even when it comes to tyranny. But that is the proposed OSHA thing.
Yeah. Well, and because it's a proposed regulation, even though it's being made underneath these, they still have to have their register of proposed rule, time frame, et cetera, et cetera.
They don't though. Because it's an emergency. They can very quickly sidestep any timeframes for public comment if they can justify it as an emergency. We've seen them do it before. I'm sure they're going to do it again.
Well, and Biden did that for the eviction moratoriums.
Yeah.
And then he was swiftly beat down in the court system because they're like, no, you can't justify this based on any type of actual emergency.
Well, right. But I mean, that's a rare occurrence. And again, that's served to shift the Overton window, because that's really what a lot of this stuff is about, well, I know I'm not going to get away with it, but it's shifting that window, because now when somebody else proposes something kind of similar, it doesn't seem all that bad. And everyone's like, well, it's not, at least he's not putting in a moratorium eviction. That or an eviction moratorium, like that's what's happening. Is this is intentionally shifting the window of
Right.
political speech further and further to the extreme. And I just, that what's happening here is the same kind of thing, because he figures, this is a gamble, and even if they lose, it doesn't matter because they've shifted the window now. So that's what the play is, right?
Yeah.
Is we're still shifting the window. So even if we lose, oh well, we still shifted it. So the next time around when we go to do this, we're good. I mean, it's going to be the same thing with, what's going to happen here is if everyone lays down and dies over this, and I already know that a bunch of governors in red states are planning a big class action, essentially lawsuit against the federal government over this, and that this is illegal and everything because it might be.
I do know, I have a friend that actually works with a red state, state house. He's a staffer, and in that particular state, the governor said, we're not enforcing this. He actually issued an order to his state patrol to insulate businesses and healthcare facilities and all that stuff from federal inspectors. If a federal inspector shows up, an OSHA inspector shows up to check compliance,
Well, see,
they
and
are
that's
ordered to insulate.
and that's one of those interesting things, because under the Commerce Clause, technically, federal government can't do this
Mm-hmm.
because
it's not interstate commerce.
right, it's not interstate commerce, it's intrastate commerce. I mean, it's just happening
Mm-hmm.
within the state's borders, and the federal government only has, under the 10th Amendment, they only have power to regulate interstate. They can't intervene in things that the states have power on. And at least they're not supposed to. But again, how's that paper shield working out for you?
The 10th Amendment hasn't been relevant since the 1800s. I mean, mid 1800s. I mean, let's be honest.
Well, yeah, and that's definitely, the case, but it's what's going on, because what's interesting is, like, there's an established piece of jurisprudence that says that when you engage in business in a state, it's contract law, that when you engage in business, a contractual business arrangement in a state, even if both parties are originally from another state, it is governed by whatever laws apply within the state that it was formed in. So, for instance, even if you aren't allowed to get short-term loans in Minnesota, right? They have it outlawed. You can drive across the border into Wisconsin and come get a loan here, and it still applies. The contract is still enforceable because the whole thing is governed by the laws in Wisconsin. It's considered interstate commerce at that point.
So it's kind of like Mayo Clinic. They have branch offices in La Crosse and in Rochester, or there's branches in Phoenix and Tampa and all those. Because they have all these places in different states, it's considered interstate commerce.
No. Here's why. If you live in that state, you work in that state, your entire business transaction with the company, which is you selling your labor to them and them then paying for it, occurs entirely within the state. That even if that company has other branches in other places, that company itself exists as a business entity within the state that you are doing business, and that is who you're doing business with in that state. Therefore, it should still only be governed by interstate commerce, but I'm no lawyer. That's my argument.
I love
anyway.
how convoluted this shit gets.
See,
and that's why I brought that up, is I wanted to, bring that up as a poison pill, if you speak, if you like.
That would be my argument, though. Like, if I was a licensed attorney and I was making that argument, and that would be one of my arguments, but it's a business within this state, that is licensed within this state. You're not doing business with Mayo Clinic of Rochester. You're doing business with Mayo Clinic of La Crosse. So therefore, Mayo Clinic of La Crosse, as a technically separate business entity, is doing business with you within the confines of the state. Therefore, only the rules of that particular state should apply.
So how would that apply necessarily? Now, again, we're no lawyers, but as a point of argument, let's say you went and saw an oncologist in La Crosse. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That oncologist said, we don't have what it takes to do what needs to be done here. I'm going to give you a legal medical referral to go to Rochester.
At that point, I think it becomes interstate commerce.
So just for a point of argument,
I think at that point it becomes interstate commerce, because at that point you're doing business in multiple states with a connected entity as part of a continuing business transaction. So I would say at that point it becomes interstate commerce and is regulatable under the Commerce Clause. But
we're not attorneys.
I'm not an attorney, so I don't know. I'm just based on my understanding. That's what I would say, but I don't know.
It's one of those things, and I bring that up only because I know I have a couple of friends that work for Mayo Clinic in La Crosse, and there have been a couple of times where they've been short-staffed up at like the Methodist Hospital in Rochester, and they've called staff from La Crosse to get reimbursed mileage to drive up to Rochester for their shifts.
At that point, I think it becomes interstate. I don't know, that's a bunch of hinky legal. This is why government sucks right here. Because look at how complicated this is already getting, right? Like, this is absurd. This is completely absurd. It makes no sense to anyone. And this is not, was it Tacitus that said the more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws?
Yeah,
I want to say that was Tacitus. But I mean, that's the way it works, right?
But it's been no secret that the state, as in the federal government, the state governments, even all the way down to the local governments, have been corrupt. I mean, government as an entity is corrupt.
Yes, very.
Since the word go.
Oh yeah, they're corrupt as shit. But the last thing I wanted to bring up about this, where it gets even more fury-inducing about how no one has liability, especially your employer.
Are you going to make me refill my glass again?
I don't know. We'll see here. But so because of the
Supreme Court, it's empty right now. Don't make me do it.
So because of the Supreme Court and other lower courts jurisprudence, periodically, companies acting in a manner that is being compelled by government agencies are generally almost always shielded by the liability afforded to that agency. They're considered an agent of that agency while doing so.
So your employer is considered an agent of the agency that passed the regulation that forced them to do the thing.
Well, regulation is where it gets a little murky, and I might be misapplying it. Again, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know, but I might be misapplying that a little bit. But from what I could gather from the admittedly limited resources that I have at my fingertips to be able to read through other people's legal opinions and things, what it sounds like is it could be argued that because there's been multiple times where that's been established, that when a company is being forced to do something by the government, something very specific, that then it is effectively treated as an agent of that government and therefore is afforded essentially qualified immunity. That's usually done by using the DPA as the argument in the courts. In the various cases, they usually point to the DPA and go, DPA, not liable. I was forced by government. Look at this. Says I'm not liable. But I've seen a few cases where, for instance, speech is being compelled by a company or against a company is being compelled to speak. And what that means is like they're being compelled to reveal information. Okay, so in general, companies get the same Fifth Amendment protections ish as a regular person would, but not always. Actually, very frequently not. But um, the case in particular I'm talking about, a company was forced to give up data on one of its customers. It was compelled to do that. The customer then sued the company for giving it up, and it was ruled that you can't do that because they were compelled by the agency, and therefore, because they are acting compelled by the agency, they're not liable for any material harm that might have come of your privacy being violated by this. So
Oh Lord.
now that's not directly corollary, but I don't personally see a reason in today's political climate to think that that wouldn't get extended readily and thoughtlessly, probably with a disgustingly broad scope by any majority opinion, um, to other acts being compelled by government of companies. Like, I mean, after all, when have you ever seen the government not lick its lips like a starving wolf staring at a lone fawn at any opportunity that it has to expand its ability to get compliance without any accountability?
Well, that's government as a nutshell.
So like there's no way that they're not going to try that. Like I know they're probably going to. And what's going to happen is people are going to listen to this and then they're going to watch all that crap happen in court and they're going to be like, "Holy cow, told you."
Right?
Like,
God damn it, Alex Jones.
yeah, like I'm just that's if I were the one coming up with arguments to justify why this is okay, those are all the arguments that I would use, right? If I was the government, these are the arguments I'm going to use. This is all the stuff I'm going to use. If I'm your employer, this is what I'm going to use as arguments. And I bring it up because it needs to be really painfully obvious to everyone working within the system on this will not work.
No.
Mass non-compliance is the only thing that you can do.
Because I'm not going to name any names because it's irrelevant, but I know a fair number of healthcare workers right now who are not willing to go through getting the experimental jab. Some
Yeah.
of them are frontline patient care.
Yeah, and why would you, if you're a healthcare professional, you understand the risks. Why would you put yourself at risk?
Right. And more than one of them, I've seen posts on social media, but more than that, I've heard people say it out of their own mouths. We worked through all of this with PPE, doing things the right way, making sure that we wash our hands, sanitize when we can, cover ourselves up when somebody comes here with a confirmed case. So why is that suddenly not good enough?
Yeah, like it works for the flu, which kills every year easily the number of people who have died from COVID in the United States
Or more.
and
it's far more dangerous to young people, which is what they keep hiding behind with all of this shit. Is they hide behind, oh, we're trying to protect the kids. We're trying to protect the kids. The kids aren't the ones fucking dying from this. I was doing research for a speech I'm going to be giving at a local school board meeting on the 20th. And according to the CDC's own data, as of the rolling 7-day average, as of 9/4/2021, for children aged 5 to 11 of deaths, 0.
mm-hmm.
For children aged 11 or 12 to 15, it is 0.01 per 100,000.
0.01. So there is 1/100th of a death per
100,000 people. Yes. For children aged 16 and 17, there is, survey says, a 0 per
Yeah.
100,000.
Well, yeah. So you literally have, if you do that, you literally have a less than 1 in a million chance if you're a preteen to a teen, to a young teen, to die of COVID.
And if you stretch that out into late teens, early 20s, it goes, I think it was 0.02 per 100,000, if my memory is correct, as of 9/4/2021, which is the most recent data available at the time when I was doing my research.
Yeah. I mean, so
So
it's,
you're talking about a 0.03, a 100th of a person, or 300ths of a person for every 100,000 people in that category.
yeah, they got it.
That died. That's the actual death rate.
Right. But that's what I'm saying is, of all of the ones that got it,
Yeah,
less than 1 in 100,000 died.
less than a tenth of one in 100,000. I mean, the left foot of one person hasn't died.
Yeah. I mean, that's,
I mean, when you really look at it, the left foot is approximately 1/10 the mass of a human body, of a healthy human body.
so that means that a regular teenager
Yep.
in the United States is significantly, exponentially more likely to die in their buddy's car on a Friday night, every Friday night for their entire life. That odd is higher than them dying of COVID if they get it while they're a teenager.
To put it into even more perspective, they're more likely to be playing, if they say they're a high school athlete, they are more likely to be struck by lightning during a thunderstorm in the fall playing football and dying of that than they are of dying of COVID.
What we need common sense lightning control.
Right?
And we need more lightning rods in more places. We need to just turn every hilltop into a forest of giant steel poles, because we need to think of the children.
And to put that, to go even farther down that rabbit hole, you and I are in our 30s. I'm in my mid to late 30s. You're in your mid to early 30s. For us, the death rate is still less than 1 per 100,000 on average.
Yeah.
And now they'll say, well, what about the hospitalizations? The hospitalizations are off the charts. I would like to also provide for you the CDC numbers on hospitalizations for children aged 0 to 17. 0.49 per 100,000.
So still
Less than one.
Less than one. Less than a half of
Less
one.
than a half of one per 100,000 people, which is, in the grand scheme of statistics, a statistical 0.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, a great man once said all statistics lie.
Well, that's
but
true. But I mean, if you really look at, even if you consider a rounding error, 0.49 rounds down to 0.
Yeah, I mean, it does, and it's, and that's, and on top of that, you got to keep in mind too that that's not accounting for comorbidities, and statistically, people who are either die or are hospitalized COVID have at least 2, 3, 19 additional COVID comorbidities to COVID. So that's still not necessarily COVID itself. That's everything else.
Right. I know one person. I actually knew one person who died of COVID. And his case went like this. He had COVID. He got sick. He ended up hospitalized. He ended up on a ventilator. He started to rebound. They took the ventilator off. He was doing fine for a day. He developed pneumonia. He went back on the ventilator and he died.
Because it ruined his lungs with the ventilator.
Right.
and
he
the
had
pneumonia.
leukemia.
Oh, and he had leukemia. And by the way, he also had a statistically fatal disease. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of manipulation that you see constantly, and that's what's happening. That's what's driving all of this hysteria. That's what's making all of this stuff keep happening, and simultaneously, because of all they're drumming all this up, now the federal government is making a big time play for serious power.
Mm-hmm.
And never think that it's going to stop at, oh, you have to get a vaccine if you work for somebody over, with over 100 employees. That's the start. That is the beginning of where things start going, because after that, it's just going to keep rolling and rolling.
I was going to say, think of it more like a negotiation. Their starting bid is 100 employees. If you roll over and take it right now at 100 employees, within 6 months, it's going to be 50 employees.
Yeah, the federal government is the mouse that you keep handing a cookie to, right? And then he's going to want a glass of milk, and then he's going to want a napkin, and then he's going to
and
how
moreover, he's going to keep showing up with more and more and more of his friends.
Yeah, except that at the end of this, if you give a mouse a cookie, he shoots your dog, takes your house, and throws you in a cage.
But by the way, Andrew, when we do get shipped off to the FEMA camp after making this, I hope we're in the same one. At least I'll have somebody to talk to.
I hope the FEMA camp has a nice gym.
Right?
Yeah, when we inevitably get black bagged and so.
I mean,
and that doesn't even sound.
That's not that far fetched. Look what's happening in Australia right now.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That doesn't even sound all that far fetched anymore, because Australia has actual quarantine camp. So Australia went 0 to the Third Reich almost overnight. They're ordering everybody to be exactly where they are expected to be, exactly when they're expected to be there. They have the concentration camps for the Untermensch. We
are the Untermensch here in the United States.
Well, yeah, if you're unvaccinated, you are effectively a non-person to the Branch Covidians, right? These cultists. You're a non-person.
Even if you've had it, even if you've had COVID. In my case, I paid out of pocket for a goddamn titer test to show that I had long-term plasma cells in my bone marrow. And I'll tell you what, that shit fucking hurts.
I can imagine.
And I paid out of pocket for this because they wanted proof so I could travel to a site less than 200 miles from the hospital that I work for in order to replace a piece of RAM in a dead host, in a dead server.
It's how many people are every day other than you are making that journey between those two towns instead. Absolutely absurd. It's this cult mentality, this absolute utter terrorist, the exact same kind of thing, right? And we're seeing it largely from the political left in the United States. I mean, not exclusively, but we're seeing it largely from the political left. But this is the exact same kind of thing that we saw after 9/11 from the political right, with everyone's a terrorist. Everyone's a terrorist. There's bioweapons everywhere, and everything's going to be the next 9/11.
All of that resulted in the Patriot Act.
That resulted in the Patriot Act. That resulted in an enhanced, strengthened, and renewed NDAA. That resulted in the disastrous war in Afghanistan. That resulted in the nearly equally disastrous war in Iraq. That resulted in, and don't forget, we also got engaged in gunfights in the Philippines. The GWAT is, the global war on terror.
Yemen
is, global. Syria,
some in Oman, Syria, Lebanon.
Libya. That's why we contributed to taking down Gaddafi. I mean, this is stuff that, again, as soon as they could, do the Hegelian dialectic, as soon as they could they could sell people the problem and convince them that the problem existed, that they created in the first place, they were then able to whip everybody into so much fear that they were willing to accept whatever solution was put forward, regardless of whether it made any sense or not. And we're seeing the exact same thing again here. It was the political right in the early 2000s, and now, a couple decades later, it's the political left doing it.
Oh, almost exactly 2 decades later.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's resulting in the same. It's resulting in something that I think the political right, the conventional political right, and the conventional political left in the country don't see, which is that it's just a back and it's not a forward backward thing. This is just an ever forward march towards complete totalitarianism, a total police state of Orwellian proportions. It's just a steady march that direction.
And where we are right now, I mean, with this decree from the Biden administration, where we are right now, I mean, this isn't quite hell. To steal a quote from a book that my late father gave me when he passed away, it was a book on the first Iraq War, and it says, "This isn't hell, but you can definitely see it from here."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are on the precipice of falling into a complete totalitarian state. You want to talk about totalitarianism? We are staring at the exact type of government that was prevalent in great films like V for Vendetta or 1984 or Animal Farm, if you've ever read the book.
Well, or
We
seen the
are there.
cartoon.
Or seen the cartoon. We are there.
Yeah, I mean, this is stuff that dystopian writers, I mean, Philip K. Dick kind of envisioned stuff like this, and crap, he wrote Metropolis.
Oh shit.
Anyway, Metropolis talks about this, and envisions this, and Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, Brave New World,
Brave New
that
World.
also envisions something like that. Hey, even Equilibrium, the movie Equilibrium, which I encourage everybody to see. It's pretty darn good.
Very good movie.
But it's also this dystopian reality. The Running Man, all of these dystopian movies and novels, and
let's go with something a little more pop culture-y for our younger listeners. Think of the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
I mean, case in point, right fucking there. The Hunger Games.
Well, yeah, the whole story of how the whole story of how the President Snow took power is through creating emergencies and making everybody really, really scared, and and assuming emergency powers he just never gave up. And like, this is a classic trope. And you notice that all of these people, and probably so many of the same people who go, well, if you don't want to get vaccinated, you don't have any right to participate in society. First of all, bold of you to assume I want to participate in your society. But they will go
join the Amish.
Yeah, but I mean, they will go to these movies and they will cheer Katniss Everdeen. They will cheer Stanley 1984, the hero. Anyway, they'll cheer on the rebels, right? They'll cheer on from V for Vendetta.
They'll go to Star Wars and they'll cheer on the Rebel Alliance against the evil Empire.
Yeah, and yet not understand that what they're doing in their day-to-day life is enabling Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader and encouraging the construction of Death Stars. And like, these are the kind of people that really, if they lived in that universe, they wouldn't be fighting alongside Princess Leia. They would be standing on the promenade of the first Death Star and applauding as Emperor Palpatine and his Imperial Guard get off of his shuttle.
These are the types of people that would have happily joined the 501st and marched on the Jedi Temple during Order 66.
Yeah, I mean, that is what these people really are. And there's this really bizarre cognitive dissonance where simultaneously that's who they really are, and they're still cheering on the Rebel Alliance. They're cheering on all the other people, and half the time you'll see them like with labeling themselves as like defiant or rebellious or the resistance as they're cheering on the federal government and the establishment and the mass media and
Rage Against the Machine.
that is now rage on behalf of the machine.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I blared, after Biden's order today, I blared their first album, which is either self-titled or XX, as you'll see it labeled on like Spotify and stuff. But like I love that album. Like I bought that album when I was a kid and was way too young to actually be listening to the lyrics. And I bought that album myself, and I always loved that album. That is before Rage turned into what they've turned into now, which is just a bunch of big government shills blatantly. They were still communists, blatantly communists at the time, but they weren't as bad.
No, they were more pushing against, the establishment of what we see here every goddamn day. And now they stand on their stages and they go, and they, like you said, they rage for the machine. They shill for that big government power, because now that big government power more closely aligns with their individual views.
Yeah. They've now, I mean, that's the thing. They're fake rebels, and the world is full of fake rebels, people who pretend to be against the establishment. They pretend to be these independent thinking individuals, when really all that's happening is that they're just thinking counter to what the majority is right now. They're, as soon as the majority, as soon as the government and whatever, the establishment now thinks the way they do, now they're all about the establishment. They're not anti-establishment. They're not pro-freedom. They pretend to be it. And I mean, we're seeing that a lot with, a lot of the people, and in hilarious fashion, with a lot of people when Trump announced that he's working on the vaccine, and you see all their tweets and stuff where they talk about, well, I wouldn't trust that, and I won't trust Trump, and anything that his government came up with, I don't want anything to do with it. And then they're like, oh yeah, bring on the vaccine mandates now.
Right, because it's Biden pushing them.
Yeah, because now it's Biden, and it's only a year and a half later, and they've completely flipped. And these are the same vaccines that Trump was trying to get made, that you were against, which made perfect sense. But now, because Biden is the one that's pushing them, you're okay with it. Now you've completely flipped. You were never thinking for yourself. You were never independently analyzing things or questioning anything. You're just towing a political line that was defiant in appearance, but ultimately in substance was definitely not that. And those are the people now who, even if they're starting to lean against it and starting to question, you'll still see them constantly say, well, we just need to work within the system. You just need to, vote harder. Like I've seen comments from hardcore red people that are like going, oh, 2024 can't come soon enough. Do you honestly think that's going to change anything?
It's not. Yeah, we're not even going to make it that far. We're going to be in depression era and a depression era economic state well in advance of 24.
Well, we're going to tear ourselves apart in the next 6 months at the rate things are going. I mean, there are more, there are more gun owners now than ever before. We had, in the past 18 months, I want to say it's like 31,000 or something new gun owners in the United States. Or 31 million new gun owners in the United States. New gun owners. These are people who didn't own firearms before that are now purchasing them. We have,
prior to that, the estimate was 85 million gun owners in the United States. Now we've added 31 million new ones. That's over 100 that's 110 million, 113 for something like that. Too much whiskey to math, but that's over 110 million gun owners.
Well, yeah, I mean, and to put that in perspective, the Chinese army, which is the largest army in the world, comes in, if you factor in all reservists, everything else. Yeah, the largest country's organized military.
Yeah.
It comes in at like 2.8 million.
In a country of 1 point some odd billion.
Yeah, and it's like 2.8 million is what their military is. So 2.8 million, largest organized military in the world, versus 100 118 million gun owners in the United States. That's a pretty good comparison. And what that says, I mean, the fact that all these people are buying these guns, the fact that, I mean, body armor companies can't keep up with orders. No one can find ammunition still because everyone's buying so much of it and everything. The country is preparing to rip itself to shreds.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's seeing that you can't work within the system. My whole point with going through the laws of why you can't sue, the system is rigged. It simply says your opinion doesn't matter. What happened to you doesn't matter. You don't get to call anyone to account if you get hurt because we made you do this.
Yep.
I mean,
to anybody out there who's a gambler, the deck, I mean, right now you are trying to play 5-card stud with somebody who has a stacked deck for 7.
You're essentially right now, you're trying to play blackjack with a separate deck from the dealer, and you don't have any face cards.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's happening.
Your highest card is a 4.
Yeah, like that's what's going on right now. You are playing on an entirely different level than they are, and it's so stacked against you, you cannot win. I mean, I like to make the point to mention to people, like when they start talking about, oh, well, maybe this time. So have you ever seen those claw machines? Right? They have them in like bars and carnivals and stuff where you put in your quarters and there's a little claw and you got to move it and then you can grab stuff. And it always seems like I thought I had it and it just didn't pick it up, or it fell out of the claw before it got to the chute where I could get it. And it seems like the claw is getting weaker as it moves. That's because it is. The claws are programmed to have only, because they're pneumatically driven, they are programmed to only build so much pressure in so many tries, and it's one out of so many tries where it will actually have enough pressure to not only grab and pick up the item, but it will maintain that pressure all the way back to drop it. That is a blatantly rigged game. There's no point in playing it. It's designed solely to get you to throw as much money into the machine as it would take to simply buy that item. That's all it's there for. And that is what you are playing when you're trying to work within the confines of government, is you are just working at a claw machine that you should know by now is rigged. And yet you just keep trying. You just keep throwing quarters in. Like maybe this time, maybe this time, maybe this time, maybe this time. And one out of every 350 tries, yeah, it'll have enough pressure and you'll grab something. That's called random reinforcement. And it's one of the reasons that one of the things that contributes to gambling addiction, because the gambler's fallacy is that, well, I have to win eventually. And even though it took you 500 tries and the odds were 1 in 200, because you can't actually figure out that it's 1 in 200 every single time, even if you win after 500 tries when it should have been 200, you go, see, I knew I'd win eventually, and it just reinforces your addiction to doing that. Government's kind of like that. They give you wins randomly so that you keep thinking that you have control, and you keep thinking, if I just keep playing enough, I'm bound to win. All it is driving an addiction. It's a gambling addiction, and you're committing to the gambler's fallacy, because the reality is, if you play 200 times at a game that you will win, that is a 1 in 200 odds, that doesn't mean that at time 200, if you haven't won before, you have to win, because every single time you play, the odds are 1 in 200. You could mathematically literally never win.
And that's the thing that very few people, well, I shouldn't say very few, more people are waking up to that fact with this declaration today. Because I mean, I have seen people all over the place that were hardcore, just got to work within the system, just got to work within at this point, I had one guy message me earlier today and say, any idea where I can get some extra magazines? Because there are a great number of people at that point.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's, and I said that on my Twitter, and I'm going to say it to everybody listening and everybody watching. I do honestly think the country is about to tear itself apart. Regardless of what your opinion on that is, the reality is that if that does occur, you and your loved ones are going to be in mortal danger a lot. That is going to happen. And if that happens, you need to be prepared. You need to be stocking up on non-perishable food items, on bottled water, on water filtration systems that you can use, things like life straws, things like that. You need to be stocking up on medical supplies and learning how to use them. You need to stock up on weapons and ammunition and learn how to use it effectively. Body armor is definitely not something you should eschew. And if you can't afford ceramic, I am here to tell you personally, from experience, the steel with a triple coating for anti-spall will work just peachy.
I am also here to tell you that if you do end up going with steel, and I won't deride you for doing so, if you end up getting hit in the plate with steel, go home and make sure that you have a stockpile of Flex Seal,
Yeah, just
because that
spray it.
does work for a replacement anti-spall coating.
Yeah, or well, I mean, like my plates are sprayed with rhino lining, professional rhino lining.
Yep.
3 coats. That's if you can afford the ceramic, great. If you can afford frass, by
Even
all
better.
means, get the frass. It is the best, like the best possible armor would be that probably frass on the front, ceramic level 4 on the back, and then just steel level 3 pluses plus on the sides with some good build-up coating, and that's going to be awesome. Absolutely fantastic. Like, could you get away with frass on the back? Yeah, probably, but I'd be worried about my spine and the impact and whatever. But realistically though, like a steel plate that isn't ideal is still better than absolutely nothing. And we're getting down to the wire here where you need to stop worrying about getting the Gucci gear and start worrying about getting stuff that's good enough. Like, if all you can afford is an Anderson AR, that sucks, man. But hey, a poverty pony is better than absolutely nothing.
I was gonna say, if all you can afford is to buy the $450 to $500 PSA build your own kit, buy it now, put it together, and learn how to use it.
Yeah, like we're not a prepper podcast by any means, but at this point, like, man, the collapse is coming like a freaking train, and if you can't see that, you're deluding yourself. So like, you need to start worrying about taking care of things. We already have food shortages. We're already I've seen people complain that some of their gas stations have run out of fuel. That's already something that we're
Today,
seeing now.
my wife went to the store to buy kitty litter. Cat litter is currently on a shortage.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We went to go to the store. We were gonna buy soda, right? Or pop around here. We're gonna go buy some pop at the grocery store, and they are out of tons of stuff right
Yep.
now because not because they're that no one's making it. It's just it's all getting snapped up so much, and because of the shortages of things and the shortages of drivers, the shortages of shipping companies, there are shortages with fuel because of all this stuff. It's getting really hard to move stuff around. And with all the shutdowns and everything else, and keep in mind, if anything's produced in California, it's going to be real hard to get your hands on.
Yep.
Right now. So like it's a problem, and it's only going to keep getting worse. If you think it was bad trying to get your hands on toilet paper during the all of the shutdowns, imagine how much harder it's going to be to find toilet paper when there are literal patches of warfare every 10 miles around you. You think you're going to find toilet paper? Like, no. And get the hell out of cities. Like, I know I'm in a city, but I'm kind of stuck here right now. If I get fired for not getting the vax and not going to get tested because I don't feel like getting stabbed in the brain once a week, well, hey, you know what? I probably won't be living in the city anymore. So,
I live in a town. It's a small town, but it's still a town. I still have neighbors on top of me.
yeah. And
And if shit goes as I'm anticipating it probably will, probably not going to be here a whole lot longer.
Yeah, I mean, we saw what happened with the looting and things in the Twin Cities and in Milwaukee and Chicago and Ferguson and all these places. There have been these big riots. We've seen all the looting and things. What do you think is going to happen to you when all of the stores have been looted out, including all the food, and now everybody's hungry and they don't have a stockpile. They don't know how to farm. And if they can get to you, they're going to get to you and they're going to get your stuff. So you need to learn how to defend what's yours, learn how to defend what you care about, learn how to farm, learn how to raise things, buy chickens, buy goats, like figure this
And
stuff out, man.
another thing I would like to point out, ladies and gentlemen, is if you do happen to live in an urbanized area and there's not really a good way for you to escape it, get to know your neighbors.
Yeah, get to know your neighbors because
So
it's
you can
amazing what
work
an armed
together.
neighborhood will do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can work together to keep everybody safe
I mean,
and to keep everybody fed.
yeah, I mean, look at how everybody came together in Koreatown in LA during the riots, the Rodney King riots. Like that was an amazing coming together of these communities. They're all armed, they're all defending their businesses, they're taking care of each other, they're defending each other. You need to start doing that stuff. If you haven't started by now, it might be too late, but it's never too late to at least gain a little bit of knowledge and gain a little bit of a leg up. Always stop, never give up, never surrender, right? From Galaxy Quest, the greatest Star Trek movie. Um, like, just it is. All right,
It is. I love that movie.
It's great. I mean, even Patrick Stewart got a kick out of it, and Will Wheaton thinks it's fantastic. So it's but that's
well, fuck that commie.
shut up, Wesley. But that line though, the never give up, never surrender, like that's a big thing. Like don't ever give up. Don't ever think, okay, it's too late, I can't do anything else, or I'm not gonna have enough time. A little bit is better than nothing. So start learning stuff, start working on stuff, start figuring out how to build a Dakota fire hole, figure out how to, cook over an open fire if you've never done it before. Start to learn how to do those things, because a lot of that stuff takes experience and it takes you practicing it.
Something that I will tell everybody to start learning how to do, and there's a plethora of YouTube videos out there on it. Figure out how to make a shelter.
Yeah, shelters are going to be big. You know what? Buy yourself a Wooby and a poncho.
Yep.
All right, because those two things together, man, pretty
can
solid.
Save your life.
Yeah, they're pretty solid. They're not ideal, but they will work. And you know why you need a Wooby? Because without it, you will be cold. I have like 3 Woobies, and I adore my Woobies. So
I'm still waiting for somebody to send me one for my little one.
Yeah. Well, I'm with all of this going on, the fact that I might not have a job much longer, like
yeah, I know. That's why I haven't bought one.
Yeah, that's kind of a problem. I don't know. Still holding out hope that that position at FPC is still listed. I'm hoping maybe I will hear back from them, and then I'll pack up and I'll move to Las Vegas. We'll see.
I sent a message to a ammunition manufacturer that's not too far away from us. I was like, hey, I don't suppose you guys are looking for some help, are you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's at this point, you got to start thinking on your feet. You got to start learning how to think on your feet. And that's an important thing. You got to be able to keep up with a changing world that is changing ever more rapidly every single day. Because this morning when we all woke up, the big news we were waiting on was Chipman. And by the time we're going to bed, we're about to be in a draconian police state. So
yeah, that there's no more succinct way to put it. I mean, we are at that point. We are staring into the precipice of what's going to be probably one of the greatest rises of tyranny in world history.
it's going to have to compete pretty hard to beat Australia right now. But
we're not far behind.
0 to Third Reich overnight is pretty impressive.
It is, but I mean, we're not far behind. If this goes, if this final, finishes out and goes into effect, which it most likely will, then it's not that big of a leap from what Biden said today to what's happening in Australia.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and all you can do, because like a lot of people, I mean, like my girlfriend had to take his Xanax for the first time in 2 years because she was panicking so bad over this and stuff and what it could potentially mean. And and I know our co-host Jason is not on because he's not feeling great because of this and stuff and not really in good shape. He's really worried. A lot of us are really, really worried. All you can do is hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
And we cannot emphasize prepare for the worst any harder.
Yeah. I mean, it's not worth having a panic attack over. It's not worth freaking out because freaking out isn't going to change it. It's not going to alter the outcome at all. It's not going to make anything different. All you can do is go, okay, what do I need? If this happens, what kinds of things? Make a list, figure it out, fill that list, get everything on it, check it all off, get your bug out bags, whatever ready, just in case. I mean, hopefully it just sits there. But if you need it, you're going to need it right now.
Yep.
Don't wait until it's too late, right? And don't, yeah, I think that's a good place to end. Don't wait until it's too late. Start preparing now. And the moral of the episode is you can't work through the system. It's rigged.
The system is stacked against you, and it will always be stacked against you as long as you continue to try to play by their rules. If you want actual meaningful change, you have to step outside their rules, and you have to play by an entirely different set of rules.
Yep. And because of Brandenburg v. Ohio, we will not go into exactly what those are, but you are going to have to realize that there is only so long you can work within a system as corrupt as this one before you have to see that it's not going to work ever. So,
and before Andrew and I get ourselves drone striked, I think that's a good place to leave it.
Yep. On that bombshell, it's time to end. Yeah. So we're gonna call it quits for the night. I hope you guys like the special episode, and I hope it was informative. You learned some stuff and are able to intellectually arm yourself against anybody who says, "Well, can't you just sue them?" or "Why don't you just sue them?" or "Oh, don't worry, I'll just sue them." Arm yourself with that knowledge so that you can be like, actually, no, you probably won't be able to, and like anticipate this because that is a terrible game plan. And maybe it'll open people's eyes a little bit if you bring it up, and they'll see just how rigged the system is. Maybe you'll make some converts, to Anarchy. Always just be planting those seeds, man. So we love you guys. We thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Everybody who sends us fan mail, we really, really appreciate it, even though it makes all of us feel incredibly awkward because we don't know why we're so great. But we definitely appreciate hearing from everybody, though. It's really nice. And, if any of you listening have any sway at Firearms Policy Coalition to get them to hire me, like, it'd be really cool if you put in a really good word and stuff, because kind of want the job.
He's leaving me out to dry, folks. No.
It would be an absolute dream come true for me to do that. But all right, well, we appreciate it, guys. You guys have a good night. We'll see you later. Peace.
Peace.